Last week, we asked listeners the very fascinating question, what is a lesson you've previously taught underpinned by ideas that you are now realizing that you were completely seduced by, you've changed your mind on? Neena, I want to hear what some of your earlier lessons were like.
Oh gosh, so many to choose from. The one that stands out in my mind in particular was several years ago, either in my first or second year of teaching. So it may well have been when I was an NQT, back when it was called NQT. And I had this delightful bottom set year 8 group. And we had just started studying Macbeth in order just to introduce the play to them because they'd be studying it in greater depth for their GCSE. There's a couple of key things I remember about teaching this text to that class. The first one is that I probably spent, it was about a 6-week unit, and I probably spent the majority of lessons, this is quite mortifying admitting this, but just showing them there was this cartoon adaptation of the play that was very popular on YouTube at the time. And I was actually advised by some colleagues that this would be a great way for them really to get into the play in an engaging way, because they'd obviously struggle to understand Shakespeare otherwise. So just rewatching it over and over and over again.
Welcome back to another episode of Operation
Education.
I'm Pritesh Raichura.
I'm Neena Sharma.
Wait, so you're not only showing the cartoon version, but you're doing this...
I mean, it was a good cartoon version.
Okay. Did it use Shakespearean language?
Oh, that's a good point. I think it was a combination of some of the original Shakespeareans when it came to some of the more important, memorable quotes, but the rest of it was in standard English, just so it would be accessible.
And the reason you were advised to show this for quite a significant proportion of your teaching time rather than actually engaging with the text or discussing and explaining it yourself is...
just because they would be able to access a cartoon, and it would be, and it sort of like would be in their best interests rather than me trying to actually teach them the original Shakespeare play.
Oh.
So yeah, that was fun. The second thing also linked in with the same classes.
Can I just interrupt there?
Oh, go for it.
I'm just trying to get my head around this. So if you had a class that was at the top end in terms of their prior attainment, a more able group, whatever the language is used, was it the same expectation for that?
That's a really good question. No. So that would have been used as an end of term treat. Let's watch the film now and the final day. Whereas for my group, it was very much like this is their main tool to learn the play. Right.
So quite literally, depending on what group you were in, the expectations of how you'd engage with Shakespeare were completely different.
Exactly. And actually, I think I also taught the top set of that year group. Having said that, so I definitely remember, yes, that would have been frowned upon if I'd been showing them that cartoon kind of throughout the unit. So that was saved for, a rainy day. Okay. But for the bottom set, it was the primary resource to teach them about Macbeth.
So this exemplifies how expectations can be different because of a particular label or group and assumptions made about that group and I'm lost for words.
I think you're right about that. Speaks to just having low expectations. But then another lesson, and it was just one lesson that is very memorable, is where I think we'd come across the witches. It might have been the opening scene or maybe when we see them again later on in the play. And so we devoted an entire lesson to the kids coming up with their own spells and imagining that they were the witches, and an hour spent on that. I mean, it was quite fun, I'm not going to lie. But looking back, I mean, if you had to ask me what learning actually took place, probably not much. I mean, I think most of them sort of understood something about rhyming couplets, but I think the main success criteria was try and choose some of the most disgusting parts of dead animal carcasses to put into their spell. And I think I also put on some spooky music in the background just to really set the atmosphere for this.
Ooh.
I also think, goodness me, that we borrowed a cauldron from the drama department as well. So the final part of the lesson actually involved acting this out.
This actually sounds really fun.
This actually does. I'm like, oh my gosh, this actually was. Yeah, it was amusing to say the least.
So this actually sounds fun. Genuinely engaging fun. Why is it that you think this is an idea you were seduced by? And why would you change your mind now?
So I think I was seduced by it because, as far as I can recall, during that time when I started teaching, the focus was heavily on the importance of engaging the kids and making lessons fun at any cost. Because I think the impression was, if you do that, then kids will just learn by osmosis or whatever. So
You're
I think
trying to be a
that's the
science
first point.
teacher now. That's what's going on there. Osmosis.
It just slipped out, yeah. But in addition to that, I think that was sort of the motivation. But this was just, I feel, the accepted wisdom at that time. And I think particularly when you're a newer or more inexperienced teacher, because of your lack of experience, you will just defer to what other experienced colleagues will advise you to do. And we just all sort of bought into this was just, this was just normalized, really. And that there was no counter narrative that I was aware of anyway at that time that I could really discern between different approaches. It was very much like, this is the way.
Yes. And it's interesting because we look back now at that lesson and we kind of laugh about it. But at the time, we were spending hours of our lives planning lessons like this, delivering them, and thinking we were doing a fantastic job. And that, I mean, it kind of makes me a little bit sad that so much time has been lost in the profession where practice that ultimately is ineffective has spread because of how seductive some of these ideas are, or how a particular way of thinking and planning just prevailed. And I think it's important to remember what that was like so we can safeguard against that happening in the future.
Do you remember silent debates?
No, you're going to have to tell me a bit more about that.
So I think this was the year 9 group where, so for example, I'll stick with the Shakespeare theme. I think they were studying Romeo and Juliet, but they hadn't even opened the first page of the text at this point. So this would be the first lesson in the unit.
In fair Verona, is how it begins?
Yeah, but just park it there. Don't embarrass yourself any further. But you're along the right lines.
I literally don't know anything further, so that's why I stopped there.
Brilliant, and then you'll stop. Okay, it's natural pause. Good. So firstly, in terms of the setup or the layout of the room, desks would be grouped in sort of islands. So let's imagine I had like 4 islands, which consisted of like 6 desks each. So I had 4 islands. So I would firstly print out a visual from the prologue, because that's the prologue of the play. It's the first part of the play. I print out kind of a visual. So it might involve sort of the 2 feuding families. So 2 groups of people who look like they're in conflict with each other. So you've got to source that first. You've got to print it out. You've got to stick it on these pieces of paper.
Coloured sugar paper.
All of that jazz.
Yes.
Exactly. So I'd stick one on each. Let's say I had 4 A3 sheets of paper, 1 for each island. And then I'd sort of place them on a desk in each island. The kids would come in. And I was going to say this is meant to be, the intention was this is a starter activity, so it just takes a few minutes. But the reality is it would probably take about half the lesson. And the kids would sit down, but then they would stand up. They'd have a pen in hand. They would look at the image and they would write down any sort of questions or comments that they have that are prompted or generated by that picture. They spend a few minutes doing that, and then they'd sort of move on to the next desk. That might be a slightly different image from the prologue. And that's what the majority of the lesson would be. And I'd clap myself on the back afterwards and think, yes, and the kids were really engaged because they're physically moving around the room. And that really was, definition, very literally, of active learners.
Active learning.
Yes,
I remember it well.
No passivity there because they were physically on their feet.
And so they would respond to each other's comments silently.
And then write their own questions and comments.
Silent debate.
Yeah.
So I had...
How silent do you think they actually were, though?
That is a great question. Depends on how good your call to attention was.
There we are.
Okay, so that reminds me of, I didn't do that exact activity. I had a different version. So I had been to this course from another, there was like an outstanding school that ran a program for like how to become an Ofsted outstanding teacher, which was the old categorization, the top category. And it's the same principle that you've just described, but instead of the kids moving from desk to desk, they would write their answer to the prompt on their sugar paper. And I think this was called throw the snowball. And they would scrunch up the piece of paper and then they would throw it across the room. And then you'd pick up that piece of paper, unscrunch it, and then carry on doing the response. I think that trumps the amount of engagement than you probably had in your lesson.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So take that, Miss Sharma.
Oh my giddy aunt. And these, I mean, obviously this was several years ago, and it is challenging to look back and to, remember individual lessons. But actually this was the norm, though. This is what most, like, not necessarily the exact activities, but I think definitely that idea of the priority of the teacher is to make lessons fun.
Yes.
Fun in this kind of sense.
Yes.
So that this will engage the students. And if the students weren't engaged, and often the teacher would be blamed, make your lessons more fun.
And that's such a shame, isn't it? So if the class isn't behaving, it's the teacher's fault for not engaging enough or choosing engaging enough activities.
I definitely got that as feedback in the early part of my career, the first couple of years, for sure. And I do recall that vividly. And
were these lessons observations did you also have graded lesson observations as well?
I can't remember in terms of the grading, but I remember specific feedback being this lesson was not fun enough. Therefore, the kids weren't engaged. So you need to essentially step up your game for next time.
Yeah. So I remember teaching a lesson. You're going to be shocked to hear what the topic I taught was in this example.
I bet I'll never guess it.
Have one guess.
Oh my gosh, if you actually say it's photosynthesis. Have you actually taught other science topics other than this? Actually, you know what? I joke. I did see a lesson recently of yours on... Wait for it, it's coming to my head. It was so memorable, I've forgotten it. Biodiversity.
Yes,
yeah.
Biodiversity.
But that was just one. But yeah, photosynthesis, that's just your...
90% of the time I teach photosynthesis.
99%.
That's true of all science teachers.
Yeah. Okay.
Not just me.
Fabulous.
So this was actually a memorable photosynthesis lesson. So obviously, if you've been in so many of my photosynthesis lessons... Don't
put me on the spot and test me now.
You've just set yourself up for this now.
No.
Tell me the reactants of photosynthesis.
I'm not. No.
Right, so...
I mean, obviously I know what they are.
Go on
but
then.
I'm just not going to...
Then.
No, I don't want to show off.
Come on.
No, I'm not, I'm too humble for that.
There's a tick next to your name waiting to be given.
Oh, now I'm so conflicted because I feel so incentivized to get your warm, specific named praise. But I also don't want to make a complete fool of myself and get these wrong because I have set myself up for it. Go on.
Right. Well, hopefully hearing the lesson will just embed it in your memory forever because the learning value is so strong. So brace yourself. The two reactants of photosynthesis are carbon dioxide. And so I laminated CO2 or carbon dioxide onto maybe dozens of little bits of paper. And I put blue tack on the back of each one and stuck them all over the room. Then the second reactant is water. So I put H2O into laminated bits of paper. I filled up trays with water, put them all over the room, and then put the H2O/water, the words and the symbols, into the trays of water. And then the kids had to go around and collect water from the trays of water. And carbon dioxide was under their seats. It was on the tables. It was on the walls. And then you had to bring them together and then add in and write that, okay, what's going to happen is they will be combined from the air and from the soil to make glucose and oxygen. And I genuinely thought, and again, this was a similar thing. It was the bottom set year 8, that it would make it much more memorable for them that these are what the reactants of photosynthesis are, and that, you know, the water is wet. Obviously, they literally experience pulling the water out of a tray of literal water. And what ended up happening was the kids were splashing each other with water. They were like finding all these bits of paper. The game was to find as many bits as they could, but they didn't actually care what it had said, what it was written on them. And I'm not convinced that they actually learnt and remembered the equation.
Shocking.
Shock horror. And I think, again...
But they had a fun time.
They had fun.
Okay.
They did.
And
I tried my best to make it memorable. But again, I mean, look, we're hardworking, intelligent professionals, but we were seduced by these ideas because, as you say, they were what prevailed, and they were that they were just normal and considered good practice. But the idea, I think the seductive idea in that one is experience is so powerful at helping you build memories. And I think the irony is that there is an element of truth to that, where, you know, sometimes a visceral experience, like we do remember visceral experiences. So why would that not be true of learning photosynthesis? And we just need to turn photosynthesis into something that's really memorable. But of course, the problem is they're not actually thinking about carbon dioxide and water. They're thinking and remembering how they splashed each other, and how the tray nearly tipped over and spilt water everywhere, and how it was a really fun game that there was hundreds of these carbon dioxides to find all over the room, including under their seats. And so that rather than actually thinking about science, they are thinking about moving and pushing and splashing and trays and blue tack, rather than thinking about carbon dioxide, plants, water, glucose, oxygen. And actually there's thinking about the wrong thing in that moment. But I think I've spoken to so many teachers who taught in this way for many more years than I did. And that was because at a certain time, you know, some years ago, the tide started to shift. And I think so many people are grateful that that shift came towards teaching that actually was informed by cognitive science. But people also, I guess, feel a bit robbed that they taught for so long. And I include myself in this, but I know that it was a shorter time that I taught like that compared to colleagues and friends who I speak to. And I think that's a real shame.
For some of them, that was decades of, or that was the majority of their career.
Yeah, and it's, you know, there's so many blogs online about this where people recount those experiences and they share them, that I think that it's so important for current, what are the equivalent of newly qualified teachers, the ECTs, early career teachers, to not forget that this is the kind of thing that went on, so we don't kind of repeat those mistakes of the past
and go back to those bad old days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other reasons that we or kind of ideas we were seduced by that perhaps we've now changed our mind on?
The only other thing that I recall very vividly, the kind of default lesson for when, if the class was behaving quite poorly, or it was approaching the end of the unit, or it was a cover lesson, or it was a weaker group, was just to draw posters.
Yes.
Because that was, in inverted commas, consolidating their learning. So I also remember that even if you weren't an art teacher, and obviously I'm English, every classroom would have a pack of coloured pens and crayons. It was considered an essential part of the equipment, along with all the scissors and the glues and all that jazz as well, because inevitably there would come a point, quite regularly sometimes, where that would be the entire lesson.
Yeah, and in science that would look a lot like comic strips, which just explains a particular process through comic form. Yeah, I thought you were going to say comic strips, but you're right. Now I'm thinking back, a lot of my cover lessons I think would have been posters. But they're obviously just thinking about colouring and not thinking about the actual content. And it just, it's such a shame, isn't it? So much time wasted. I was going to say the other thing that I was very much seduced by was the idea that, so most of my schemes of work that I wrote when I first became head of biology was to put information on posters and put the posters around the room and then kids would go around, fill in either all the posters and like a table that links to each poster, or one or two, and then in groups return and teach each other what they have learned from the posters.
Yes, it's the teaching each other stuff.
Yes. And I think now I look back and I remember having this big debate in my head and thinking, how, you've got posters around the room, you've got the marketplace activity of them teaching each other, you've got, all these various activities that resemble that style. And the big question that I used to ask, when I would go on training is, how do you decide which activity to use when? Like, that was the thing that I thought, if I nail this, I've nailed teaching. And what the kind of the understanding that emerged was, well, it depends. What skill are you trying to develop in the kids in that class? Is it communication? Is it team building? Is it critical thinking? Is it presentation skills? Because every lesson, they're going to learn the science content anyway. You might as well also teach them a skill that's going to be helpful and transferable. But the irony is that these pedagogical methods, these activities, ended up with the kids learning neither the content, because the kids are just running around the room, or they're even if they're trying hard to like absorb information from a poster, they're not going to deeply understand it. So they're not going to understand it accurately. By the time they then explain it to their groups, the chances that everyone leaves with strong understanding of those ideas is so low that they are neither developing the scientific knowledge, nor are they actually improving their communication skills. Because, well, if you're practicing communicating something you don't fully understand, you cannot be developing your communication skills effectively.
Exactly. But it's also that focus on activities. So there was a time when you're thinking about the planning or the intellectual preparation of your lesson, that would be the first consideration. So you'd plan the fun activities to engage the kids, and everything else would be planned around that, which we know now is not the most optimal way to plan and sequence a lesson or a unit of learning.
It's such a shift, because now what we talk about is the content. How is the learning going to build on prior knowledge? How are we going to make sure that the ideas cohere and sequence well, and the examples that we use and all of that kind of stuff is so much more in our language than like a sequence of examples, non-examples, fading the scaffolding. Those are phrases that I did not hear when I started teaching. Whereas marketplace, posters around the room, teaching each other, active learning were all things that I did hear lots of.
Yeah.
And minimal teacher talk.
Oh, yeah.
Why is it that you would talk loads when the kids can just teach each other and talk to each other?
Well, because the kids obviously have as much knowledge as I do, because they've gone to university and got a degree in the subject that they're now learning.
But that's a good example.
As well as all the teacher training. So, of course, they're in that position to be teaching each other effectively. That's a bit of a silly question, Pritesh,
oh,
actually.
Silly me.
Come on, it's a bit obvious.
But this is a good example of where that word authority has become lost, that we alluded to.
Not that dirty word again, honestly.
Yes, because as a teacher, part of the reason you have authority is because you have authority in your you've got this more subject knowledge than the novice learners who, look, they might have some knowledge of that subject, but the whole point of you being the teacher is you've got more knowledge than them. You are the expert. And I think that's another asymmetry that was lost, that I think, again, that's shifted now. I think that idea of subject expertise, the idea of the teacher being at the front has become much more normalized than it was when we started teaching.
And we're not talking about kids never being allowed to talk in a lesson. Like, once they've got the knowledge, they need to be playing around with it in a flexible way, because that really develops their understanding, right? And all of that, and practicing a lot. But that's a distinction between the expectation of them teaching something to each other that they have never been explicitly taught. So what, are we just assuming that they've acquired this again through osmosis or just randomly? And I can't even begin to think about the amount of misconceptions that must be perpetuated and could be dependent on who you are lucky or unlucky to have as your partner or have next to you in that horseshoe or whatever, or that island or whatever it was.
Yeah, and it's just the chance, it's all left to chance, isn't it? Whether they learn it sufficiently or not. And I think that what we need to be doing as teachers is to eliminate the possibility that there's any chance whatsoever that a child leaves your lesson without feeling successful in the knowledge that you have shared with them and the skill that they have developed over the course of your lesson. And that actually plays into, I think very early on, we talked about winning hearts and winning minds. And it's only when we can teach in a way that leads to the kids genuinely leaving thinking, I understand this so much better now, that we win their minds. But in doing so, they feel successful and they feel more intelligent, and that wins their hearts as well.
Interesting. Whereas a lot of these strategies maybe had the intention of winning their hearts, but if that was done, it was only very superficially, but they weren't really engaging their their minds in the right way.
So I think next episode, we'll delve into, we've talked today about what we did that we think is now not the best decision for learning and for winning minds, for winning hearts. Next episode, we're going to dive into, well, what would we do instead? How do we ensure that we do win the minds of the kids? What concrete things can teachers do? What principles underpin that? And what the effect also is of winning minds on winning hearts.
Love it.
And that's exactly what we want listeners this week to think about and share their thoughts on for next week's episode. Next time on Operation
Education.
We very much hope you are enjoying listening to Operation Education. If you are, consider leaving a review and rating the show on your podcast app. Hit that follow button if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out when a brand new episode drops every Thursday. If you would like to share your answers to the scenario/question, or even want to suggest a topic for a future episode of Operation Education, then get in touch. Email me on pritesh@bunsenblue.com. Operation Education is a Bunsen Blue production.